When I first encountered her, she seemed like just a shadow in the dimming light. She was thin and weary, clearly suffering from hunger. Her ribs were visible under her dull, matted fur, and her green eyes showed a mix of fear and hope. I wasn't particularly fond of cats, but something about her captured my attention. Without giving it much thought, I placed a bowl of food down. She quickly devoured it, her urgency evident, and then she disappeared into the night. The next morning she returned, and this time she had company. Curled on my doormat beside her fragile body were 4 tiny kittens. My heart raced at the surprise of it. I found myself standing in the doorway, the cool morning air suddenly feeling irrelevant. She lifted her head, and I decided to call her Willow, a name that just came to me. She looked at me with a mix of caution and familiarity, her body wrapping protectively around the shivering bundles nestled against her. The kittens hardly moved, just a few soft wriggles and twitching paws, their eyes still closed to the world. A wave of uncertainty washed over me. I didn't have any experience with kittens, how to feed them or keep them safe. I felt an urge to reach out for help, but who could I turn to? The nearest animal shelter was quite far, and I wasn't certain they would take them in. Willow let out a quiet, raspy meow, pulling my attention back to her. Was she asking for more food, or perhaps for help? I stepped back inside, grabbing the same plate I had used before and filling it with scraps, some shredded chicken and a bit of tuna. As soon as I placed it down, she hunched over and began to eat, but she watched her kittens intently, never losing sight of them. I crouched down, slowly reaching out a hand toward her, but she tensed up. It wasn't a warning, it was uncertainty. She had trusted me enough to bring her babies to my doorstep, yet I could sense her hesitation about how far that trust extended. And the truth was, I felt a bit uncertain too. The morning air was crisp and still, yet my thoughts were anything but calm. I sat on the porch, observing this delicate family that had taken refuge at my feet. Willow curled protectively around her kittens, her tail shielding them as they squirmed against her warmth, their fur incredibly soft. Watching them stirred new feelings within me, an intertwining of wonder and worry. I found myself facing a challenge I never expected, caring for a stray mother cat and her newborn kittens. I wasn't particularly fond of cats, and I certainly hadn't planned on taking on such a responsibility. Yet here they were, and ignoring the situation wasn't an option. I pulled out my phone, unsure of who to call. The nearest animal shelter was quite a distance away, and the idea of leaving them somewhere unfamiliar felt uncomfortable. After some consideration, I decided to reach out to Mrs. Callahan, my elderly neighbor. She had lived in our town for many years and seemed to have a grasp on everything that happened around here. When I called, she answered after just 2 rings, her voice warm with curiosity, as if she sensed something out of the ordinary. As I explained my situation, I heard a brief pause followed by a light chuckle from her side. She mentioned that Willow, the mother cat, had been wandering around for months, but had never allowed anyone to approach her. There was a tone in her voice, perhaps admiration or relief, that caught my attention. "But she trusts you," Mrs. Callahan remarked simply. Her words resonated with me, and for the first time since this unexpected morning began, I felt a shift in my perspective. Before I could figure out how to respond, she continued in a reassuring tone, "Stay put, dear. I'm coming over." After ending the call, I glanced back at Willow. Her steady green eyes met mine, unafraid. It was clear, she had made a decision. Whether or not I felt prepared for this, it had become my reality. 15 minutes later, Mrs. Callahan arrived in her old sedan, dust swirling as she parked in my driveway. She exited the car with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done, her cardigan pulled tight against the morning coolness. Without any hesitation, she walked up the porch steps to kneel beside Willow, her movements slow yet purposeful. Her hands hovered gently above the mother cat, allowing Willow to gauge her presence. But the cat merely flicked her ears, acknowledging Mrs. Callahan without fear. "She's thinner than I thought," Mrs. Callahan remarked, tilting her head as she inspected Willow. "And the kittens, good Lord, they must be only a day or 2 old." She then turned to me, and her calm gaze shifted to something more serious. "You know what this means, don't you?" I shook my head, uncertain of what was coming next. "What?" With a sigh, she settled back onto her heels, ready to share what I needed to know. She didn't just bring the kittens to you because she trusts you. She brought them because she can't manage this alone. She's worn out, Daniel. Without the food you provided yesterday, she might not have had the strength to care for them at all. Her words settled in my mind like a new understanding. I had thought I was simply feeding a hungry stray, but it was more significant than that. I wasn't just someone who happened to provide food. I was her only hope. I took a deep breath, rubbing the back of my neck as I processed what Mrs. Callahan had said. Willow hadn't chosen my porch by chance. She had come to me because she truly needed help. That realization was heavy, one I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I had assumed she could handle her kittens without assistance and that I'd just be a silent observer in this unexpected situation. But now, I saw the truth. She was relying on me. Mrs. Callahan stood up from the porch, brushing off her knees. "She's fortunate to have found you," she remarked, her tone hinting that this was more than mere luck. "But this isn't going to be straightforward. Those little ones are delicate, and she's not in the best shape. If she's too weak to nurse them properly, you'll need to step in." I gave her a confused look. "Step in how?" She frowned slightly as she seemed to consider her response, then locked eyes with me. "Bottle feeding. You'll need to do it around the clock, every 2 to 3 hours. A wave of anxiety washed over me. "You mean I actually have to feed them? Myself?" "Well, they certainly won't be placing a takeout order," she replied, her voice dry, but then she softened it. "You don't have to do this all by yourself. We'll gather what you need, and I'll help. But Daniel, if you're in, you're really in." I glanced at Willow, her weary eyes fixed on me, clearly waiting for my decision. Whatever I chose to do, the time to decide was now. The weight of that commitment made my chest feel heavy. But before I could respond, Mrs. Callahan was already mobilizing. "Let's get supplies," she said, turning toward her car. "We'll need kitten formula, bottles, blankets, and a heating pad. Do you have a box or something to keep them in?" I looked from my porch to her. "A box?" She let out a sigh and shook her head. "You can't just leave them outside, Daniel. They're newborns. They can't regulate their body temperature yet, and with their mother being as underfed as she is, she won't be able to keep them warm enough by herself." I felt a tightening in my stomach as I looked at the tiny, vulnerable bodies nestled against Willow. Bringing them inside seemed daunting, but leaving them outside felt even worse. I ran a hand down my face and took a deep breath. "All right, I'll figure something out." Mrs. Callahan gave me an encouraging nod. "Good, I'll be back soon with what we need." As her car faded into the distance, I found myself staring at the small family at my feet. This was no longer just about feeding a stray cat. It was about stepping into a role I hadn't anticipated. Without overthinking it, I headed inside and searched my house until I found an old storage bin. After lining it with towels, I hesitated for a moment, then carefully placed it on the kitchen floor. Whether I was ready or not, I was bringing them inside. Willow paused at the door, her ears twitching as she eyed the open space. I crouched beside her, my hand reaching out just above her back. "Come on, girl," I whispered. "It's warmer inside." She stayed still, her body still curled protectively around her kittens, tense with uncertainty. I had thought she would trust me completely after I had helped her bring her babies here, but I was learning that trust doesn't come easily. She had taken a risk coming to me, but stepping into my home was a whole other challenge. What if I made a mistake? What if I grew too attached? Pushing aside my own doubts, I gently scooped up the kittens, placing them inside the storage bin in my kitchen. The moment they were gone, Willow's head shot up. Her body tensed for a second, and then, with a quick breath, she followed them, as if realizing how vulnerable they were without her. She slipped inside before I could fully process what happened, rubbing her cheek against the bin to check on her little ones. I exhaled, realizing I had been holding my breath. She was in, and so was I. The atmosphere of the house shifted with their presence, as if the quiet had transformed. I could hear the soft rustle of tiny paws against the towels, the gentle mews, and the rhythmic sound of Willow grooming each kitten. All these sounds blended together, creating a delicate heartbeat in the background. This should have felt like a temporary solution before returning to my normal life. yet something deeper had changed. The sight of the tiny kittens, so small and needing care, turned my house into a home. It felt less empty and more alive, even as a weight pressed on my chest, the nagging thought that I wasn't actually keeping them, despite the reality unfolding around me. Just as I was trying to sort through my feelings, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I let out a sigh, pulled it out, and saw it was Mark. He was the last person I wanted to explain this situation to. "Hey," I answered, preparing for his reaction. "Hey man, you at work today?" His tone seemed casual, but I could sense where this conversation was headed. I hesitated. "No, something came up." There was a brief silence before I heard him scoff. "Wait, this isn't about that cat, is it? You're not really getting into this mess, are you?" I rubbed my face, glancing at the makeshift nest in my kitchen. There was Willow, curled up with her kittens, her body tense even in sleep. She looked exhausted, her chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. The sense of responsibility settled heavily on me, not just that, but something deeper I wasn't quite ready to face. "I didn't really have a choice," I said quietly, but Mark wasn't convinced. "You always have a choice, dude. What's your plan? Keep them? You're just gonna let your whole life revolve around a bunch of strays?" His words stung. It wasn't that I disagreed, but deep down, I knew he wasn't completely wrong. I had told myself this was temporary, just something to sort out. But once I had let them in, I crossed a line. Maybe it was when I set that plate of food on my porch. Mark took a sharp breath. "Look, I get it, man, but you know how this goes. First, you think you're just helping out, and then before you know it, they're yours. You need to decide what you're going to do before it's too late." As the call ended, his words stayed with me. I wanted to believe I could still control this, and that I could take them to a shelter tomorrow, letting someone else handle it. But as I sat there watching Willow breathe and listening to the soft sounds of her kittens shifting in their sleep, I sensed the reality. This was not something I could easily walk away from. Not anymore. The sun had moved across the sky by the time I finally got up from my seat. Its warm light poured through the window, casting a golden glow on the floor. Willow was peacefully dozing in the bin, her kittens snug against her belly. Their tiny bodies rose and fell gently with each breath she took. I should have felt relieved knowing they were safe and warm, but Mark's words lingered in my mind, unsettling me. I tried to convince myself that this was just a temporary situation, that I was only here to help. But deep down, I knew I was fooling myself. There wasn't an easy way for me to step back from this responsibility, especially since Willow had trusted me. I had already started noticing little things about her kittens, the way they twitched in their sleep, and how Willow's ears perked up whenever I approached. It felt as if she was aware of me even in her slumber. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Mrs. Callahan, standing there with a small bag of supplies. Her discerning eyes assessed me immediately as I let her in. Without saying a word, she set the bag on the kitchen counter and began to unpack it. I watched as she took out tiny bottles, powdered kitten formula, and soft blankets that carried the faint scent of lavender. "You've got that look," she remarked, glancing at the bin, "like a man who's just realized he might be in over his head." I let out a soft laugh, running a hand through my hair. "I think I reached that point hours ago." She nodded, clearly undeterred by my admission. "That's how it begins. First, you worry about them making it through the night. Then, you start thinking about tomorrow, and before you know it, they become part of your life." Her voice softened as she turned to me. "Are you really ready for that?" I wanted to admit that I wasn't, that I was still sorting things out, and that this was just a short-term arrangement. But the words stuck in my throat because I knew I had already made my decision the moment I brought them inside. The atmosphere in the house had settled into a comforting routine. The kittens occasionally stirred, stretching their tiny paws against Willow's belly before drifting back into a peaceful sleep. The air was filled with the comforting scents of fresh blankets and warm milk from the little bottles, blending nicely with the gentle afternoon breeze flowing through the open window. I had never really noticed how sunlight streamed across my floor until now. As it stretched toward the bin where Willow lay, it felt like a spotlight shining on an undeniable truth. They weren't going anywhere. Not today. perhaps not ever. Mrs. Callahan stayed longer than I anticipated, calmly walking me through the basics of caring for kittens, how to keep them warm, how to mix formula in case Willow couldn't nurse, and how to handle them if I needed to step in. Her voice was steady, filled with the wisdom of someone who had been through this before, who understood the path ahead even if I wasn't ready to acknowledge it. As evening fell and she prepared to leave, she looked at me carefully, one hand resting on the doorknob. "You know, I've seen many strays come and go in this town," she said, her tone measured and thoughtful. "But I've never seen her stay anywhere for long, until now." I remained silent. I didn't need to say anything, as if my silence spoke volumes. "Well, I suppose we'll find out what kind of man you are." With that, she left, her words lingering in the dim light of the house. I found myself standing in the doorway long after her car had vanished down the road, gazing at the quiet street beyond my porch. This situation was no longer just about the cats. It was about me. Night settled in, wrapping the house in a heavy stillness. I sat at the kitchen table, an untouched cup of coffee cooling in my hands, the soft overhead light casting long shadows on the walls. The storage bin, just a few feet away, held fresh towels, with the kittens nestled within, their tiny bodies rising and falling in uneven breaths. Willow lay curled around them, her tail spread protectively over their little forms, as if to shield them from the outside world. I should have been tired. The day had unfolded so quickly, yet my mind raced on, Mark's warnings lingering in my thoughts about how these situations could quickly become permanent. Mrs. Callahan's steady voice cut through that noise. This wasn't solely about the cats. What kind of man was I becoming? I ran a hand through my hair, letting out a sigh as I leaned back in the chair. I could still walk away. I could reach out to a rescue, let someone else take over, and return to my usual life. The idea of packing them up filled me with unease, especially as I caught sight of Willow's cautious eyes while carrying her towards the door. It stirred something deep inside me. Then a soft mew broke the stillness. One of the kittens stretched out, its tiny body shifting and its paw reaching into the air, as if grasping for something not visible. I felt a lump in my throat. I rubbed my face, trying to shake off what felt like a foolish and reckless thought. But looking at those small creatures, so innocent and evocative, it became clear to me. I couldn't let them go. Sleep didn't come that night. The house was silent, yet my mind was anything but calm. My thoughts wound around each other, making the walls feel closer than ever. Sitting on the couch, I clasped my hands together, my gaze fixed on the storage bin just a few feet away. The kitchen light only reached so far, but I could still see the gentle rise and fall of Willow's chest, a steady reminder of the life that had unexpectedly become my responsibility. It wasn't just about them anymore. Hours had passed since I realized this matter went deeper than mere care. It was about a commitment. For years, I had embraced a simple life, shying away from complications and never allowing anything too close. My routine was clear: work, home, sleep, and repeat. Yet now, in just 2 days, a stray cat had opened something inside me, a part I wasn't sure I could close again, even if I wanted to. Now I was faced with more than just a dilemma. I was confronted with a choice. What scared me more, the idea of keeping them or the thought of letting them go? That thought pressed against me, leaving me uncertain about who I was. Just then, the soft sound of rustling brought me back to reality. Willow had raised her head, her green eyes meeting mine in the muted light. She wasn't moving or making noise, but an understanding seemed to pass between us. In that moment, I sensed what decision lay ahead. Time felt suspended as we exchanged silent acknowledgement. Willow's eyes remained fixed on me, calm yet knowing, almost as if she anticipated my answer. The kittens wiggled against her, their tiny paws twitching, completely enveloped in her warmth. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees, feeling the weight of this choice solidify within me. From the start, I had convinced myself this situation was only temporary, that I was merely offering assistance while seeking a better solution. But now, as I gazed at them, I realized that the meaning of temporary was shifting in ways I hadn't expected. I had learned not to fool myself anymore. There was no scenario where I could walk away from this. I couldn't just gather them up, carry them outside, and hand them over to someone else. My decision had already been made long before I realized it. It was woven into how I had welcomed them in, how I lay awake listening to their tiny breaths, and how I had noticed every little flick of Willow's ears whenever I moved. Something inside me gently opened up, quiet but undeniable. I reached out, a bit unsure but determined, letting my fingers graze Willow's fur. She didn't flinch or move away. Instead, she blinked slowly and settled her head back down with her kittens. The tension I had been carrying all day transformed into something softer, a feeling I wasn't sure I had ever experienced before. I let out a breath. "All right," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. "I guess you're staying." Those words hung in the air, serious and definitive. There was no going back now, and for the first time in what felt like ages, that realization didn't frighten me. The following morning felt different. It wasn't just the presence of Willow and her kittens. Something inside me had changed. The air, usually filled with a sense of detachment, felt fuller and warmer. Even the smallest sounds seemed more significant. The soft rustling of tiny paws against the blankets, the gentle hum of Willow purring as she nursed, and the sunlight stretching across the floor, bathing them in its warm glow. I stood by the kitchen, coffee in hand, watching them. They were still so tiny and delicate, yet they no longer seemed out of place. This was their home, and somehow I had become part of it. Mrs. Callahan had been right. It all started with one small act, just feeding a hungry cat, just offering a safe place to rest. But life often unfolds in unexpected ways, guiding us toward choices we didn't even know we were making until those choices become irrevocable. Maybe that's just how it is. Perhaps we don't always choose what transforms us. Sometimes those moments choose us. I breathed slowly, setting my coffee down and crouching beside the bin. Willow lifted her head, blinked at me, then stretched, pressing her paw lightly against my arm before sinking back down with a sigh. I realized I wasn't just caring for them. They were also taking care of me. Life often surprises us in unexpected ways. Think about a time when a small decision led you to an outcome you never anticipated. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where an animal, or even a person, needed your help more than you realized? If you can relate, I invite you to share your experience in the comments. If this story strikes a chord with you, consider passing it along to someone who might benefit from it. Perhaps there's someone contemplating a decision, feeling uncertain about their path. Sometimes, a gentle push is all it takes to recognize that what we believe we're saving could be saving us as well. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, because often, the tiniest moments can spark the greatest changes.